Hey y'all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it's time for part 15 of this record collection tour, as I'm sure everybody has been waiting in great anticipation after the last part, which I assume means that most people wanted to just kind of get past the fucking Kingston Trio. That's okay. We're beyond that. We can move on. Let's have a go. Maybe you like the Kingston Trio too. That's fine, you know. And if I'm on an island with that one, I'm on an island with that one. In any case, we have one more entry for the Ks before we continue on. This one, I suppose you could argue, should be under M because the person's last name is Maldonado, but she released it under her first name, so that's what I'm going to go with. This is interesting. This is Kirsten Maldonado. The lighting is really bad there. There we go. It's called Love. Kirsten Maldonado, I already talked about Avi Kaplan being another member of the a cappella group Pentatonics, who I used to be really into. Less so these days, since they've kind of turned into more or less a Christmas novelty act exclusively. Kirsten Maldonado, another one of the members. This was her debut EP from 2017. Here's the thing. I bought this because it was at a discounted price. It was, I think with the discount, it was like $10 or something. I don't actually remember liking that EP all that much. I thought it was very derivative of a lot of pop sounds from the mid to late 2010s. And it's interesting because she has a great voice. Kirsten has this very, I suppose, Broadway type of vocal delivery, which makes sense because theater is her background. And I don't know that it's used super effectively on that record. I think they were maybe steering her away a little bit from her strong suit. She's not released another solo project since. It's been exclusively Pentatonics related stuff since then, but I'd be very curious to see what she did if she actually tried to go solo again. I think that would be very interesting. Okay, moving on to the L's, and what an album we have here. I've said before that 2020 to me is potentially one of the greatest years ever for female musicians releasing great music. And I don't know if this is number one for me, but it's damn close. Leanne LaHavas, her self-titled record. This is just an absolutely insanely good soul adjacent record. There are so many influences kind of included here that it's difficult to summarize it with a single genre, because clearly R&B is kind of her background. You can hear that in her voice and you can hear that in her approach, but these songs also have a little bit of like a alternative, like a rock edge to them as well. She clearly is taking from a bunch of different influences. I mean, there's a fucking Radiohead cover on here, for God's sakes. This was just so well done. And I have not explored her other releases yet, so I'm very behind, but I know I need to. It's certainly top 5 record for me in 2020 that I've heard so far, possibly top 2 or 3. I mean, it's up there with the very best. And, I think, I'm not going to say it's underrated, because at least I think in online music communities, this record gets its due, but I think it's underrated in the grander scheme of things. And she's someone who could absolutely be a superstar, I think, if she wanted to be, or if she had the exposure to be. All right. From one arguable 5-star album to a couple of others, we're in Kendrick Lamar territory now. Good Kid, Mad City, with the van cover here. I think I picked this up from Target, if memory serves. Good Kid, Mad City is probably my second favorite Kendrick record. It's pretty exceptional. I mean, there's so little for me to add to the Kendrick Lamar discourse, and it's honestly hard to even want to try because people have said it much more eloquently than I ever can. But I think Kendrick fused old school hip hop traditions an old school mindset, literal like physical connections given where he came from, his hometown. Fusing that with this like very contemporary approach. I mean, the neo soul influences that you hear in modern hip hop are very fresh. And I won't say they weren't there from the beginning on some level, but I think that is the freshness that you hear in these Kendrick tracks. And granted, it's less evident here than it is on the upcoming couple of records, but it's so well done. I think lyrically, there are very few rappers who have ever been on par with Kendrick. I saw him live in 2022, and he, so just last August, and so that would have been on the Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers tour, and it was one of the most incredible live shows I've ever seen in my life. It was just, he's insanely good at just taking command. His stage presence is incredible, and his ability to do choreographed type moves while rapping at that level, changing all these different rhythms, all these different like beat switches going on, changing his tone. That's another big thing. The fact that he can replicate all that live absolutely blew my mind. And besides, I mean, there were plenty of bops. I mean, all the fucking songs from Damn had people screaming. Backseat Freestyle on here, which might be my favorite track. It's hard to say, but Backseat Freestyle just got people up and just crazy. I mean, that was so much fun. Now, sadly, at that Kendrick show, they only played 2 songs from this record, although I suppose I can understand why. To Pimp a Butterfly, I mean, what can you say about the album that might be the most important or greatest record of the 2010s? It's so... I understand why he didn't play it, because this is not exactly a record full of hits compared to Damn or even Good Kid, Mad City, and obviously he was touring Mr. Morale, so he played most of that full album. But boy, T-Pab is strong. T-Pab is strong. That is Kendrick's peak as a lyricist, in my mind, and it's the best production that you will hear in any Kendrick record. Some of the best production we hear in any record, period. All the guest spots add to everything just fantastically. And it also resulted in, or helped result in, probably the most iconic like album review. Not to make this like YouTube focused, because that record is so much bigger than just YouTube, but it resulted in probably the most iconic album review to ever be posted on YouTube, which is the Fantano 10 out of 10. I think that is a genuinely just fantastic bit of reviewing. Just straight up, it's him, you know, Anthony Fantano gushing over this record for 20-25 minutes. It's a remarkable piece of video making. Remarkably compelling, I suppose. I wouldn't even say it's that Fantano is doing anything that impressive, apart from being enthusiastic and being extremely well spoken at the same time. But yeah, that album review was super influential on me, more so than a lot of other album reviews that I've heard. In any case, big change of gears here. Cyndi Lauper's True Colors. I have not actually heard this album. This was another one that was part of a different collection. I like the title track, though. I don't know that I've heard any of the other songs on here. Cyndi Lauper is somebody who I never liked her songs as a kid when I would hear them on the radio, but I think now if I were to kind of reevaluate a bit, if I were to re-listen, I'm sure I would like her approach a lot more. I don't know what it was, probably just her voice grated on me or something, but that's probably a bit unfair, and her energy is just kind of infectious. I do really like that. All right, Led Zeppelin time. I do have a few Zeppelin records, so this will take up probably the majority of this video. First off, LZ3. No shade against the first two. The first two, admittedly, are lower on my Zeppelin list because I guess I prefer their more diverse approaches that they do in 3, 4, Houses, and Graffiti. 1 and 2 are more kind of straightforward blues rock records, which for a long time I was never as into. They have grown on me over the years. But Led Zeppelin 3 to me is where they go from being one of the best blues rock bands ever to being just one of the best bands ever. There's so much encapsulated here. This is such an English record, which is interesting because when I talk about 70s rock bands that are English, stereotypically English, people go for the very kind of twee prog rock aspect of things. They'll throw out a Yes, they'll throw out a Genesis, something like that. But this is so English in its approach to blues rock, right? I mean, yes, blues is an American genre, but I think this is very much an English blues rock approach that they are doing. And then mix it with all the folk influences, all the references here. This is so British and so excellent, so well done on every level. I don't think there's a weak track. I even like hats off to Roy Harper at the end. I just love the vocal effect and the performance. Favorite on that one is tough. Since I've Been Loving You, I've always been partial to. I really like That's the Way too. Hard to say. I mean, every track on there is either a jam or kind of beautiful or quirky in its own way. Friends is another great one. Jesus. Led Zeppelin 4. I don't need to say too much about this one. Another one where everybody knows it. Everybody and their mother knows every song on this record by heart, probably. I really like Four Sticks. I know that's the weak spot on the album, but I still really like it. Subtly an extremely hard part to play on the drums. I know, I've tried. And surprisingly, a record that has never really been ruined by radio overplay. I don't know what it is. Stairway to Heaven has never been a song that I've gotten sick of. I just think it's so effective in its build-up and how it releases that tension in the guitar solo. Black Dog, no. Rock and Roll, no. Misty Mountain Hop, no. I mean, none of those songs I've ever gotten particularly fatigued of, which I suppose speaks to how well this album is performed, how great it sounds, and the strength of the songs. So LZ4, it's a classic for a reason. Is it my favorite Led Zeppelin album? I don't know. It's pretty tight competition at the top, but there's a reason it's their most well-known and probably their most influential, and I would not debate anybody who disagreed with that. Houses of the Holy. This is probably the Zeppelin record that's grown off of me the most. There's that middle section, that middle sequence of tracks that I am slightly less fond of. But you can't deny the opening few tracks, and you cannot deny those closing 2 tracks. It contains probably my... Is it my favorite Zeppelin song? Probably. Probably my favorite Zeppelin song in no quarter. And the Rain song, frankly, might be second. I mean, there's such amazing peaks. 2 of the... I don't know if the Rain song is a dark song, but it is very melancholy, and then No Quarter, one of their darkest songs for sure. And obviously other strong stuff like Over the Hills and Far Away. The Ocean is fun. This was my favorite Zeppelin record for a period of time, and I don't think it is anymore. But hard to deny the strength of it, and again, they're starting to get a little bit kind of diverse and creative, which is interesting. Physical Graffiti. This copy here is like a little bit water damaged, I think. I think the actual records are more or less fine, though. So not too bad. Graffiti, I mean, again, if anyone were to tell me that Physical Graffiti was their favorite Led Zeppelin record, I'd be like, yep, totally get it. It is if not their most diverse collection of songs, it's up there, and it is incredibly strong too. Even the tracks that I think are a little bit weaker are also different enough from the traditional Zeppelin sound that I don't mind it. I dig it. Like Boogie with Stew, one of their weaker songs probably, but boy, that like drum effect that they're using and the kind of piano and Plant's vocal, just it all works. It all works so well. And Black Country Woman I like. So Highlight is difficult for Graffiti. I would probably go 10 Years Gone though. That would probably be my pick. I think you get a sense from my song selections which aspect of Led Zeppelin I'm most partial to, but don't get me wrong, I love those rockers. In My Time of Dying, holy shit, that's great stuff. Here's Presence, a very beat up copy of Presence, but Presence it is nonetheless. I'll show you that gatefold. I mean, the back is split. The record is like poking through it. So one day I will probably upgrade on this copy. Presence is underrated though. Despite the bland album cover, the material here I think is anything but. And despite songs that are kind of trivial, Candy Store Rock is kind of trivial, Hot Song for Nowhere, pretty trivial. I mean, it also contains Achilles' Last Stand, which how could you go wrong with that one? And then the brown paper bag cover of In Through the Outdoor. Let's see, I'm not going to take it all the way out because it's a pain to get back in, but I will show just a bit of the cover here. There we go. Into the Outdoor, for whatever reason, I had like an obsessive period with. I don't know why. I think it was. I think I was fascinated by the creation process of this record, and the fact that it was like the last proper one made with Bonham. I remember really liking I'm Gonna Crawl too. I think that one drew me in, but it's one of those records that I think is also a little bit underrated in the grand scheme of things. I don't like the synth sound on it very much. I don't think that's aged well at all. But the admittedly stuff like Carousel Alhambra is kind of fascinating. It kind of lurches around. It's kind of a mess, kind of a hot mess, really. But boy, it's interesting. It's kind of captivating throughout the whole time, which I do appreciate. So, yeah, fascinating track, fascinating album. Maybe not great, but always interesting. And now we close with my string of John Lennon records. So we've already talked about one Beatle in the context of this, George Harrison. And we start the Lennon collection with a very beat up copy of Live Peace in Toronto, 1969, with Yoko Ono. This is, I mean, it's kind of a curiosity. It's a strange record. Live performance featuring the Plastic Ono Band at the time, including Eric Clapton. Clapton makes the guest appearance on this. I am not crazy about their jammier stuff. One record I don't have in this collection is Sometime in New York City, which has a lot of that. Again, obviously, when you get into the live section. And then obviously the John and Yoko stuff from before the Beatles breakup. I don't have any of that on vinyl. Not that it isn't fascinating on some level, and I am not a Yoko Ono hater, so this is not a Yoko Ono hate channel. And if you push that narrative, chances are I'm not going to have a very high tolerance for it. Not because there isn't a conversation to be had, just because I think it's so abused and it's such an easy excuse for people to be misogynistic or potentially racist or whatever the hell. Just, no, I'm not dealing with that. But, no, but I can't really justify wasting money on those records. They're curiosities, they're strange experimental pieces, and not really that much more. Um, in any case, John Lennon, proper studio records here, Plastic Ono Band. Not my favorite Lennon album, believe it or not. And on some days, it's probably only my third favorite. But can't deny what it is, can't deny its importance, can't deny how it sort of helped create the image of John Lennon that we associate, the post-Beatles image of Lennon. He sounds fantastic on it, sounds angry on it. Therein is what I'm talking about, how that kind of creates that image. And even though he pushes back on it a little bit with this next release, Imagine, this is definitely, there's anger in here, but it's tempered by a lot of calmer songs, a lot of ballads, insecure for sure, but not, not at peace, but not at angry either. I think the result is that these two records kind of define the push and pull that is essentially any type of discourse connected to John Lennon. Between the people who think the guy was essentially a saint, between the people who think the guy was this miserable piece of shit. To which I sort of, my response to that, I suppose, is kind of that meme from that one commercial where it's the little girl going, "Why not both?" Maybe the guy had very good intentions and was also terrible to people sometimes. Hard to say, but in any case, not really the place. I really like Plastic Ono Band. I think it's a great album, but I love Imagine. I think Imagine is a great sounding album. I think it contains some of his strongest solo songs. My favorite track on here is not the title track. It is probably Jealous Guy. I love Jealous Guy. I have since I was a kid. I think it's just one of his best melodies, period. And yeah, I really love the reissue, the remix that they did back in 2018, I think it was. I actually have the box set of that. I don't own the Plastic Ono Band box set yet, although I'm hoping to get that one day. But yeah, Imagine is a fantastic album, possibly my favorite solo Lennon album. Mind Games from 73. This is probably the Lennon solo album that I'm most likely to forget exists, which is strange because this is not his weakest record by any means. This is probably right in the middle as far as his solo discography goes. But there's a lot of tracks on here that I think it's because it feels like such a transitional record, especially when you look into kind of the history of it and the place that it holds, very near the end of, I suppose you could say, the end of his initial phase of his relationship with Yoko Ono. And it kind of feels like he's transitioning out of that. And, and he's kind of also sonically, this is very different from Imagine in a lot of ways and kind of foreshadows the brassier, fuller arrangements that would define Walls and Bridges. There's great stuff on here. Title track, Isimison, One Day at a Time, Out the Blue. There's definitely some excellent stuff on here. But I think I tend to underrate that record a little bit. I'll come back to it and I'll forget how good it actually is. Speaking of Walls and Bridges, there are some days when this is a contender for my favorite Lennon solo album. I just love what he's doing here. The increase in soul influences. There's a little bit of kind of country influence at times, which I really like. Lennon sounds great vocally here. He's kind of screaming his head off. It's a shame because this album comes from a very tortured place. We associate that with Plastic Ono Band, but really this is probably the most unstable he was mentally and emotionally during his solo career. But what he turns out here, I can't deny it. I think it's so entertaining from front to back. I love Old Dirt Road. What You Got is a terrific vocal performance. So is Scared. Bless You and Number 9 Dream and Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out are beautiful tracks. And I like both the Elton John collaborations, although I'm probably a little bit more partial to Surprise, Surprise, Sweet Bird of Paradox. It's a strong album. It's very underappreciated, I think. And I think more people should, more people should give it the chance to be included in that greatest Lennon albums of all time discussion. I understand that it's objectively not as important of an album as as Plastic Ono Band or Imagine, but I cannot deny that it is entertaining and musically, at least at times, is the equivalent of both. And then my last Lennon record, last record of the video, Double Fantasy with Yoko Ono. It's a very good album. It's a quite good album that is elevated to borderline being great because of the circumstances, I think. And I'll be honest with you, I don't have a problem with that. I think I don't think you can divorce records from their context truly. If people are ignorant of the context of records, that's one thing. But I think to try to intentionally evaluate a record aside from the context, if you already know said context, I think that's an impossible task. I think that's a disingenuous task if you think that you're able to do that. And I think because of what happened to Lennon just a few weeks after this was released, I think this makes it all the more bittersweet, all the more melancholy. Beautiful Boy, Darling Boy hits like a truck now because of that. I think that's the type of song that would have been really pleasant, really nice, but given everything that happened, given Lennon's murder, it's one of his most emotionally devastating songs because of that context. Watching the Wheels and Woman are probably my two favorite tracks. The Yoko songs on here are interesting. I think Yoko's songs are normally the highlights of Milk and Honey. I don't know that they're the highlights on here pretty consistently, although admittedly Lennon's tracks are pretty strong for the most part. I do like also how the songs are kind of structured as a call and response type things, with like John's I'm Losing You leading into Yoko's I'm Moving On, that type of thing. Or how there's a John song called Beautiful Boy, there's a Yoko song called Beautiful Boys. It's very, very interesting how that balance works, and I do really like that aspect of it. So, Double Fantasy, very effective, very solid album. And that's all we got for today. So, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more videos, reviews, etc. are to come. Tell a friend as well. And I will see you guys next time at your home right here of the Music Deep Dive.